I first started doing more like link blogger outreach. So like, hey, I saw you shared insert title,
Yeah.
and then add some comment about why you liked it. I don't necessarily think journalists care about that stuff. What they really care about is that your piece is relevant to their beat.
Welcome to Search Party. Today I'm excited to be joined by Vince Nero, Director of Content Marketing at BuzzStream, and the host of their digital PR and link building podcast, which I was on recently. I'll have the link in the description. He has spent his career creating campaigns that bridge the gap between content, digital PR, and SEO, which is very similar to my career. So it's been fun to connect with him and chat all things, yeah, PR, SEO, content. Welcome to the show, Vince.
Thanks, Amanda. I'm pumped to be here.
Like I said, that intersection, I think I'm biased because I have focused on something very similar. I think it's more important than it ever has been.
Yeah, it's popping off in a big way, I think, these days,
Yeah.
for sure.
So let's kick off with our two truths and a lie. What do you have for me? What are your three things?
All right. Number one is I play the saxophone. Number two is I can do a really good Robert De Niro impression, Robert De Niro face impression.
Okay.
Um,
I love this already. Yeah. Okay.
and number three is that I can chug an entire bottle of red wine.
I'm gonna say the Robert De Niro impression is false.
Ooh. I can't really do the voice. I had a whole website that I made when I was younger called the De Niro Facebook
Stop.
because I would do that face and people were like, oh, that's so good. You should, and I like had somebody build a thing where you could like upload a face and I had an app and I'd like go to bars and be like, can you do De Niro face? And no. We had like these business cards. And then it just kind of fizzled out. But
That's hysterical.
yeah, I cannot chug a bottle of red wine without dying, unfortunately.
Wait, so you play the saxophone?
Yeah, I did. I went to music school actually, like for college. I went to the Manhattan School of Music in New York.
That's so cool.
Tried to be a professional jazz musician before I got
Wow.
into what I'm doing now.
Cool. That was fun. I realize I'm terrible at this game. I always guess wrong. Well, I'm super glad you're here. What did you bring to the party?
All right. So I think one of the big things that is kind of plaguing the industry right now from my perspective as like, digital PR, SEO, link building, this like confluence is there's a lot more people coming into the digital PR space and bringing with them some either antiquated or bad habits or just like non-translatable habits. So what I want to talk about today is how to do digital PR if you are just getting into it, especially from link building and like why there are big differences.
It's really interesting right now, especially because I feel like the phrase digital PR sort of came to be code for link building at one point, but they're not the same thing. And I think that it's even more blurry now than it ever has been. But you're right, like it's not the way that you would reach out for a link is not the same way you would do PR.
Yes.
So yeah, walk us through that. What does that look like?
Well, so let's like define, I guess, digital PR first, because I think that's where one of the first kind of like points of friction comes. And
Yeah.
when I'm talking about digital PR, I'm talking about creating news, creating an asset, pitching quotes, but specifically with the goal of getting yourself or your brand mentioned in high authority, highly read, highly respected news publications, industry news publications, we can say, because it doesn't have to just be, the Daily Mail or CNN. It can be specific to your industry. There's plenty of those, right? And that right there kind of differentiates from stuff like guest posting or link insertions or link exchanges, buying link placements in these places. Like, yes, you can go on a link marketplace and buy a link on MSN, and Forbes and Associated Press. Like there's plenty of places where if you go into these marketplaces, you're like, wow, like I can get a link on here. I mean, it costs a ton of money, but like still you'd think the only way to get in is through actual pitching stores. So
Well, and that
So
stuff's getting even, especially because LLMs are sourcing a lot of those types of articles. Like, people are out there buying insertions and like best of lists and stuff because it's working.
yeah. Yeah, so I mean, that's definitely led to, I think, this boom in the digital PR space, and why so many people are jumping on is the AI citations thing and mentions and all that stuff. But I think when you're thinking about digital PR, and if you're maybe an agency or a link builder, I think one of the things that people come, the first question is like, all right, what do I do? Right? Like,
Yeah.
um, there's questions like, do I hire an agency or do I do it myself? So if you're a link builder and you're trying to get into it, I think one of the big things to recognize is that it is a lot harder to do this if you don't have kind of any relationships with journalists. And relationships that you build with journalists have these compounding effects, right? Like, I just did this study, literally published it today, right before we were talking to you, Amanda. And basically, I looked at cold emails where like people who have not responded at all, you've never reached out to them, versus people who have at least replied once before. Open rates are way higher. As you can see, about 20%. It's like 1.5 times more likely. But where it really makes a big difference is the reply rates. And you might be looking at this and be like, duh, warm emails, cold, like totally, that makes sense. But I think the thing here is with journalist outreach specifically, you have to also kind of tamper your expectations. I think one or two, three, maybe 5 hits on a digital PR campaign is like a great, great result. It's great to have tons of links, but when you dig into a lot of the ones that have gone quote unquote viral, you'll see that a lot of it is syndication. And so like, I want to kind of couch this stuff with that, because when you say, yeah, like getting replies is great, but like, how do I know what if they don't lead to coverage, right? Like that to me is still even a win, because another thing I looked at here is this idea that like the reply rate actually goes down in this interim time that you haven't spoken to a journalist. So there is this, need to build a relationship and
Mm,
kind of maintain it. And so again, like when you're thinking of a link builder, you're really thinking of kind of a one-off thing. I need a link from this one place. I'm going to go get it any means necessary. Whereas with digital PR, I think it is really about like, okay, I'm going to kind of build this Rolodex, but getting in front of journalists takes some time in doing.
yeah.
And so the kind of next tip thing is thinking about relevancy. So when you have something to pitch, you have to be a lot more specific, I think, about who you're reaching out to, and you have to do your research. You can't be doing the, hey, I saw you wrote so and so article and I thought you might be interested in this. Like, you have to get into their bio, their beat, that really understand what it is they're covering. But one step further, you have to understand that they also have traffic goals, and like you need to make your story something that will be interesting for their readers, right? So it is not as easy as, this guy is a tech journalist and my post is about tech in some way, shape, or form. So
Yeah.
therefore, he's probably going to reach out. So, or he's going to cover my post. You have to kind of dig in. Okay, what is he covering? When is he covering? What's going on in the area that he's covering? And every news outlet really has like different ways they work, right? If you're reaching out to local news outlets, you have to understand the kind of the hierarchy of who to pitch, when to pitch. There are some people in especially local news where like if there's a weather event going on, it's like all hands on deck covering some weather event, and like they don't care about your best city study, whatever it
Right.
is that you're pitching. So there's a lot of nuances, like tech, for instance. Maybe you are pitching some story around tech, some survey or something. Just because the person writes for CNET or PC Mag or something doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be open to sharing your kind of a third party survey study. Like they might just do reviews for PC Mag, right? They might be writing the SEO articles, their listicles or something. So
Yep.
there's a lot more nuance that goes into it. And I think a lot of people who are new to digital PR think that you can just jump on like a media database and export a few thousand people and blast it out. And we've done studies to show that that is definitely not the case. This idea of like the spray and pray thing. And this is this big study that we did on 31 million emails. So basically, like everybody in our database that has done some type of digital PR, we looked at the open rates versus the number of emails sent. So there are people online that tell you, yeah, send out 1,000, 5,000. Some people like boast about the millions of emails they're sending for digital PR, and you can see that so this is open rates. They decrease. Okay, that's obvious. Reply rates, you can see also decreasing as the size goes up. But ultimately, what do people really care about with this stuff? And it's links. And so I looked into that specifically. And you can just see like the crazy amount of better coverage that you get. And I think the takeaway from this sometimes gets misconstrued where it's like, okay, I'm new to digital PR. So now, I just have to like cut my list in half, right? Like I shouldn't send 1,000, I'll send 500, or I shouldn't send 200, I'll send 100. But that's not exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying like you have to just get more targeted and like do better research to understand. And the reason that these smaller lists do well, I think, is because they take more time to do.
Yeah. There's like a layer of this that's not, that's inferred, which is if people are sending fewer pitches, they're spending more time on those pitches versus, if it's not like literally the same pitch going out to 10 people versus 10,000, it's like,
yeah,
the approach is different.
Exactly. And honestly, it's like, I don't know if like even the amount of personalization that goes into every email, maybe we have to define personalization in a different way. Like, coming from my background, I first started doing more like link blogger outreach. So like my stuff was very personalized to the like, in the way that I was kind of joking before, where it's like, hey, I saw you shared insert title, and then add some comment about why you liked it. I don't necessarily think like journalists care about that stuff. Like what they really care about is that your piece is relevant to their beat, and it really fits what their community is looking at. Like most of the time, that kind of personalization is going to feel fake to them.
Because that's like the barely personalization level, right? Because that became very popular. And I feel like the step up from that is going back to the point you made of demonstrating why what you're giving them is going to be successful for them to publish. So instead of being like, I liked this piece, thumbs up, it was cool. It's like, you published this piece on a very similar topic to what I'm pitching you, but you published it 5 years ago, but it got this many, shares. Then you're kind of like taking like, you did your research and you're like kind of pitching your case of like, and now here's an update and we want, we're hoping that it's just as successful. Like that's like the level above the just like, yeah, I spent 10 seconds pulling a recent article and I'm saying I like it without any context.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's where like the strategy comes. And like when you talk to these agencies who do this really well, they're thinking from that perspective. It's like this journalist did this piece that did really well last year.
Yeah.
And they haven't updated it since. Like they haven't updated this study. What's the value I can add to it? It's I'm going to redo this study for them and repitch it for this year. It's like that's a clear, line to. And the thing I put to everybody is like, if you were on the other side of this email, would you take action? It's like I think if you can answer that resounding yes, like you're always going to, well, not always, you get a much higher percentage of people who are going to at least respond or kind of like and see your name in there and be like, okay, Amanda sends me stuff that is reliable and consistently good. And in these days, like even having that notoriety or recognition within an inbox, I think is huge because they're, journalists are getting pitched 500 emails a day or something crazy. It's
I honestly can't imagine because I get pitched obviously not for stories, but for products, services, all kinds of stuff. And even in that level, it's like, I don't think any of them have ever been personalized ever. Yeah. I mean, maybe some of the like LinkedIn outreach I've received has been a little bit more, or they do the bare minimum, like you're at this company, but they actually talk about it in the wrong context, or they're pitching me on the service we offer. And I'm just like, it's like further proof. That's like that fake customization and personalization where, you're taking that bit and you're still not getting the context of how that exists. But the way I would love to kind of think about this is in stages and checklists for each stage, because I think that's helpful to, I don't, do you even want to go into like the type of stuff people should even be pitching? Like, I like
I
this
mean,
kind of
yeah,
framework you use for like, would you even open your own email as like,
right.
like a sanity check for the email? But like, it's as far as the, like, because anybody who's new to this, that's the question that I've gotten a lot when I've done consulting. Is just like they understand conceptually, I know I need to create something that's quote unquote newsworthy. How?
Yeah. So one of the things I kind of landed on recently is this idea of like coming up with ideas that are timely, and have some emotional hook to them. So if you can hit both of those things, you're usually going to do pretty well. And I think one of the most compelling types of digital PR that people do these days is data-driven stuff. And
Yeah.
journalists are always looking for that because it's new. And if you can have both of those things as part of your data pool, like you're going to do well. And so I'll give you an example. Like Easter is coming up here. By the time this goes live, it will have passed. But like I see a lot of content around Easter now. So you're basically like pinning into some seasonality or trending topic. Like a lot of people look at Google Trends and be like, this thing is trending. Okay, so like what can I do with this thing that's trending?
Yeah.
Because then that becomes your hook, and that is why a journalist would want to share it, right? Like again, putting yourself in the mind of the journalist is, okay, I have my content calendar, it's like it's around Easter, so they're probably getting pushed by their editors. I got to put out Easter content, right? So that's like one check off of the list is like what is trending right now or what is seasonal. And then the emotional thing is just that trigger that is always going to get shareability. And that's definitely a little harder to do because there's like different emotions and some of the stuff is hard to extract an emotion from. But I think we can get a little loose with our emotion definition. But like, I saw a really good example the other day from NBC. So NBC puts out this like public opinion poll. And it was just like this really boring 45-page PDF, no charts or anything, just like a couple tables. And at the very end, there was like this matrix of like, okay, here are the things that people like these topics. And it was like the last 180 days, what was like the sentiment value, then 60 days, then 30 days, and
Mm,
then present day. So they had been redoing that. Like this is the first I've seen it, but okay, I was like, they redo this public opinion poll. And so the headline I saw though was people are more afraid of it was I forget it was either AI, they're more afraid of AI than they are ICE or the other way around. And I was like, man, this is like a good like solid hook, right? And not every brand can do this, right? It's NBC, so they can hook into like current events like this. But looking at the data, I'm like, oh my God, like somebody went through and either the person covering this went through that data and extracted that one piece where it was like, okay, this is a trending topic. Everyone's talking about ICE, everyone's talking about AI, and being able to extract that emotion of like, we hate this more than this, that idea of hate, like, boom, that's an immediate trigger. And you can kind of use that thought process. I mean, I think that applies to the main reason that people do these like best city index studies, the best city for whatever, is because it has some inherent emotion to it. It's kind of like that ego bait thing. Like the whole idea is you come up with a city, you reach out to everybody in those cities and you say, you were named the best, whatever. And
yeah.
that's the hook. The ones that do better tie into something that's going on, right? Like these are the best cities to catch the wildflower bloom, or like in springtime, or to see falling leaves. I've seen that kind of stuff done, and those kind of do somewhat well. Or like the most Instagrammable cities during fall or autumn or something. Like those do well because they have a lot of those triggers. So I think that is key to me. And then the other thing I would say is like the expert quote thing just seems to be very big for people these days. And that is just, again, you can find a trending topic and try to kind of proactively put your voice out there. But it's just this idea of getting something to a journalist, because every journalist these days is looking for expert voices to kind of level up their content. There's a lot of services where people solicit these. Journalists will say, I need a quote, I need an expert that does XYZ. But you can also look at a trending topic and proactively say, hey, this just happened. Here's what so-and-so has to say about this. And that's kind of the news jacking thing. So I think like those two buckets are probably the best ways to do it. I mean, the data thing has a couple more layers to it, but
Yeah.
honestly, it's like just look at what your competitors are doing and try to work backwards from that is a great place to start for me.
Yeah. So it sounds like some of these principles have been the same for a while. It's so common, right? Or like in same with marketing, there's some things that are just always going to be true. Because I remember, I mean, I worked at Fractal for 7 years and I can't speak to what they're doing now, but they were all about the data-driven campaigns. And it is true because like you said, the data is quote unquote new. Even if the data itself is not new, sometimes the way you're analyzing it is new. And sometimes it's
Hmm.
that one stat. Like you had that great example of just comparing two different things, like this more than this, or
Hmm.
that does tend to work. But the emotional side of it, I think that is what people struggle with the most, especially if you work in like B2B SaaS, right? And then to those people, I'm like, yeah, but there are still emotions tied to your job and like the things, like if I'm hiring a marketing agency, for example, I have fear that I'm going to invest in something that does not bring results,
Fear
right? There's
is
still that
huge.
fear.
Yes.
They might not be as obvious, but there are definitely still emotions tied to a lot of these things. And you were totally right about the ego bait thing too, because that's a tried and true method. That is why all those location-based things work, and the localization for distribution is amazing too. So yeah, I think those are great points for people to start at. Just be like, okay, you know, how can we get a data set that's relevant to our audience? How do we break it down geographically, and how do we make the edge of it have something to do with like an emotional response?
I think another thing to think about is you can sometimes take a small step outside of your immediate
Mhm.
purview to address the same industry, but you're not, if you sell whatever printers, you can get out of that printer niche and talk about, whatever writing and creating, So I think that is one thing. And then the other thing is there are these like larger reports, these like trend reports. If you can become a source of data for people in the industry, especially journalists and industry pubs who are looking for this like recurring report on the state of whatever, like that's why we do these things, like the state of digital PR. It's like,
Yeah,
but those take a little time, right? You can't just put one out and expect everyone, like you have to establish yourself as this is what we're doing, this is our thing. And again, like it takes a little longer than like building, I think, and that's the mindset there. It's like you have to kind of have something good out there, and you can't just rely on the links to kind of do the heavy lifting. You have to kind of have a story behind it and a brand behind it a lot of the times.
absolutely. So jumping to some of the stuff you've already mentioned about like who to pitch, right? So what I heard was the things you need to look at for a writer. A, their beat, which is more specific than technology, sports, home, and, garden. More specific. Like what are they looking at their stories and seeing like what are the actual angles? What are the niches within that category that they're covering, right? So that's number one. Number two, how often do they publish? And what are they publishing? So if they're like the type of writer, I don't even know if we got into this, but if they're the type of writer where it's like they're publishing once a month, the odds of getting into something that they're doing once
Yes.
a month is very different from like a daily reporter, right? But you're right about like some people don't ever talk about third party sources. They like what if they're mostly an opinion column, or what if they're mostly, they have like their certain sources built in already and they only use their stuff, or still going into like reading the content, right? So we touched on those couple of things. What else? Is there anything else that people should look at?
Yeah, I mean, I had this acronym, this FIT acronym, FIT. I was trying to work into this, and it's basically like freshness. Like, is the story fresh for them, or that have they already covered something like this right away?
Yeah.
In the past couple weeks. And then industry, that's like the beat kind of thing. But then T would be type, and that is getting into this like the third party. Are they covering third party? Like every journalist covers different things, and you really have to drill down. And I think that's the biggest mistake that people make is not
Yeah.
understanding. Like I alluded to this earlier, like if the person only does product reviews, or if they only do listicles, or if they only do whatever opinion op-ed, that they're a columnist, like they're not the ones that you want to reach out to. So, maybe like uh advanced mode, but like you have to get the industry and beat correct first. And I think the easiest way to go with that is just looking at their author page, just reading, even reading the headlines will give you a pretty good sense for what these
Yeah.
people do. But the bios also tell a pretty good story. But I would kind of combine those two, the bio and the author page, to look at recent articles and understand that. But outside of that, yeah, the freshness thing, I think there is a little difference. You alluded to this, like the amount of time between them pitching or them writing. And I think in a lot of those cases, they will be freelancers versus in-house journalists, or, editors, another thing. But the freelance and in-house thing is a little interesting because with freelancers, they can kind of like go out and do some heavy lifting for you. If you find a good freelancer who writes in different tech magazines,
Hmm.
their job is to take interesting stories and then pitch them to editors. So you can sometimes widen your scope a little bit, or widen the range of your story if you find some good freelancers. But just kind of like keep that in mind, that like they're not one and the same. They don't, journalists that work in-house, yes, they have editors and they will still have to kind of get the story by the editor in the same way. But a journalist is going to, they might be more interested in features and not just these, one-off breaking news stories or something. Whereas
Yeah.
an in-house journalist, the other thing to say, I guess, with the in-house journalist is they're going to probably be more busy. So like give them absolutely everything they need to turn around this story in a quick amount of time,
Right.
rather than a freelancer who's, looking for a deep dive into a story like that. They might have some more time.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because I feel like that's not talked about a ton. And when people are diving in, you do notice that. You're like, okay, this person, they've only written twice for this publication, but when I search for them outside of this, they've written for a bunch of other publications. And then you
Yeah.
realize, oh, okay, they're contributing. And like the difference, it's still valuable, I would imagine, because if you're interested in all the places they're publishing, you're building this connection with somebody, like you put it well, where you're like, they're doing some of the legwork for you. You're not having to pitch the actual publication. You're building this connection with somebody who can turn your data into a story that's interesting to some of those
Yeah.
folks. But if you have your heart set on a certain publication, you might want to go straight to the source, to somebody who's
Yes.
writing more regularly there. That's a really good point.
And I would say one of the things about the like freelancer and editor and in-house, sorry, journalist is probably this challenge that a lot of link builders have too. If you don't have this established kind of Rolodex of people, is finding contact information. And like that's probably one of the hardest parts of this whole thing is once you find someone, you kind of do all the digging and you're like, this guy's going to be perfect, or this woman's going to be perfect. And then you can't find their email address. With the journalist and in-house, like freelancer and in-house, a lot of times what a lot of these tools will do that will kind of lead you astray is it's like this pattern matching thing. And again, to compare this to link building, it worked well with link building because typically you're trying to find someone at that one place, right? And so it's so-and-so at semrush.com, whatever. And like, Hunter or something will tell you this is the pattern, or any of these sites will tell you this is probably the pattern. But that doesn't really work with media because a lot of these sites are owned, like a lot of the publishers are owned by huge media companies. So like anything under Reach PLC will be an at Reach PLC email address. But there's these huge companies that just own those subsidiaries. So everything below that will be that higher at like .dash Meredith or something is another big one. So those tools don't really work as well. So you have to do a lot of digging. And like honestly, that was why we ended up building List IQ, because that process takes so long. So like we built it in a way where, okay, this is the process people use. You go to Google News, usually, and you're like, here's my story. I want to find similar people who have written about it. So I'm just going to Google News. And then you can just use this list IQ to like extract all of the data from all of the journalists. And it'll just show you, okay, here's their email address. Here's their title. It'll tell you if they're still active at the publication in the past 30 days. It'll tell you their bio. It'll tell you their recent articles. So you can kind of see all that stuff at a glance. And it just kind of really speeds up that process. I mean, sure you've done it. It's like, could be like 10 minutes that you're spending on each person, if not more. Now you can easily kind of do it in a few seconds. So having that mindset, I think, is very important, but also the tools to help for sure make it easier. But I think the biggest thing I would want to impart with people is just this idea of like the quantity versus quality thing. And like, it is okay to get fewer links, and you have to adjust your expectations, because the more that you do that, the less you're going to feel that pressure, the less you're going to pressure your employees to send a specific set amount of emails. Like every agency, I know everything is so time dependent, and I've run into this in the past. It's like, I know my team, when they send 100 emails, they get about 6 links. So every post that we do has to send 100 emails. If you set those kind of limits on people, you start like straying from this path of like, we just need to hit these couple people and we need to get a handful of links. And I think a good way to think about it when you're gauging the quality versus quantity thing, and like, because you still want links, right? It's like, okay, so spend the time to create something that is really link worthy, create a story that will get a lot of coverage. If you can do that, then you're reaching out to a handful of people like this. It's going to take over itself and do the work for you. If you have a truly good story,
Yeah.
that's where the focus should be.
You're deciding where you're putting your investment. It's like a lot of content marketing, right? Or it's like, well, if you put more effort into the actual content, you do less on the you don't have to work so hard on the distribution side if what you are distributing has legs, versus I whipped something up in AI and now I'm spending 50 hours trying to get it somewhere because it didn't start from a very great place. And that's why I think it's, if you have like the dream publication or dream, and by dream, I don't mean like the New York Times. I mean like something that's really going to help you reach your audience. It could be the New York Times, but
yeah, hey,
that's everybody's dream. We're not all going to get in the New York Times. Because seeing what that person's writing and like getting a sense of what they normally do and like imagining. I remember I used to talk to PR folks who used to imagine the headline.
Yeah.
And work back into it. Like, okay, here's this would be the amazing headline. What would we need to create to get that headline? Right?
Yes.
That's like one brainstorm.
I think that's a great way to do it. Yeah. And then people take it one step further, where it's like when they pitch to a journalist, your subject line becomes headlines, but you rewrite it in the way that they write their headlines.
Mm-hmm.
So like some people are always like, well, blah 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 blah, study finds. So you're like, okay, I want to put that word study finds in there, or whatever. Like there's little tricks like that you can do, but again, it comes down to, that's not something that like a mass email blast would pick up, and that's where the mindset shift definitely changes.
Yeah, the nuance of, again, kind of showing that you did a little bit more, you did your due diligence.
One funny thing I've uncovered recently is this idea that like some journalists use kind of their inbox almost like a database, like an ongoing database. Even if you don't even get a reply from a journalist, let alone them replying and saying it's not a good fit, they will sometimes, like if they see something that looks interesting and relevant, they'll store it away and be like, okay, so PR people have told me they will kind of almost like keyword stuff, their emails in a way that make them, if I was searching for something around this, or searching for a quote from
like
an
the topic
expert
of the
around
event
this.
or the time
Exactly.
thing. Okay.
Yeah. So they will go back and do it that way. So yeah, I mean, if you think about it that way from, your pitching and how you're developing these relationships, a good, solid, relevant pitch that doesn't get coverage, like if you're confident that, like, that's a foot in the door, that is a step in the right direction. with a journalist and building that relationship.
I think a lot of brands are trying to figure out their footing in where it makes sense to create this kind of, because it is a higher lift, a lot of this, unless you have that expert commentary side, like you were saying. And it's always good to have this is essentially a primer. Like if you're trying to get into this, here are some of the things you need to consider before you dive in, because the mistake is people just start diving in. They just pitch, like you said, like 100 people and they see nothing, and then they give up on the whole thing, and it's valuable. So don't give up.
Yeah. Love it.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. If people want to read more about what you've got going on, where can they find you?
So I'm very active on LinkedIn. It's probably the best place to connect with me. We also have the BuzzStream newsletter. It goes out once a week. Just go to BuzzStream. You'll find all my stuff there, all the blog posts and these studies that I'm talking about. That's really it. You can email me. Heck, Vince at buzzstream.com.
Pitch him.
Throw it out there. Pitch me, but make it good.
Yeah. Thank you again, Vince, and thank you all so much for listening. If you want an invite to the after party, sign up for our newsletter. That's where we drop exclusive behind-the-scenes tidbits and where guests answer our spicy question of the month. This month's question is, what's a popular SEO or AI visibility tactic you think people are overhyping? Until next time, keep learning, keep testing, and keep showing up.